You know that feeling when you're just staring at a completely blank page?
Oh yeah, the absolute worst.
Right. Or, I mean, maybe you're halfway through some massive project, and it really doesn't matter if you're like designing a complex architectural system or writing a huge financial report or just, stuck in a creative rut, you just hit a wall.
A total mental deadlock.
Exactly. And the default human reaction in that moment is almost always to just, to push harder, to grind it out, stare at the screen longer, and force a solution.
Which rarely actually works, to be honest.
Yeah. But what if the data shows the actual solution is to stop, reach over to a little black box and draw a card that gives you a completely cryptic instruction? Something wild, like honor thy error as a hidden intention.
I mean, it feels entirely counterintuitive, right? Introducing this vague, almost mystical prompt when you're actively trying to solve a concrete problem, it goes against literally everything we're taught about productivity.
We're totally conditioned to seek direct answers.
Exactly, not deliberate ambiguity.
Well, welcome to Deep Cuts and Deep Thinking. In this deep dive into the source material, we are exploring the legendary Oblique Strategies deck.
Created way back in 1975.
Yeah, by the musician Brian Eno and the visual artist Peter Schmidt. This deck is basically an analog cognitive hack. So we're going to unpack the cognitive science of why controlled randomness actually breaks creative deadlocks.
And we'll get into some pretty wild historical case studies too.
Oh, for sure. Like David Bowie's Berlin Trilogy. Plus, we'll reveal how you can apply these analog heuristics to modern AI workflows in today's world. Okay, let's unpack this. Before we get into the heavy psychology of how a piece of cardboard hacks the brain, we really need to understand the crucible that forged it, right?
Yeah, the origin story is deeply tied to the environment of the late 1960s and early 1970s because Eno and Schmidt were both working in these incredibly high-pressure, high-stakes artistic environments.
Like expensive environments.
Incredibly expensive. If you picture a high-end recording studio from that era, it was not a relaxed, free-flowing space at all. You had massive hourly rates, just accruing significant financial debt by the minute.
Literally a ticking clock on the wall.
Literally. And it caused artists to panic. When the human brain panics under temporal or financial threat, it completely loses its ability to access non-obvious tangential pathways. It just falls back into safe, predictable, highly linear problem-solving techniques.
Which is the exact opposite of what you want when you're trying to make groundbreaking art or, innovate in any field, really. You just start doing what you already know works because you're terrified of wasting expensive studio time.
Right. The brain defaults to survival mode. And in creative work, survival mode means cliches.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So Eno and Schmidt, independently at first, recognized this biological trap. They started writing down personal lists of defensive constraints.
Like cheat codes for their own brains.
Basically, yeah. They were notes to themselves, reminders of alternative working methods for when panic threatened to hijack your decision-making. Eno had his friend list written on bamboo cards scattered around his workspace.
Oh, wow.
And Schmidt had been developing something he called the Thoughts Behind the Thoughts, which was this self-published wooden box with thick cards printed on disused, ruined prints from his studio.
So they realized their lists heavily overlapped, and they combined them into a single cohesive deck in late 1974. But here's where it gets really interesting. The physical specs of this deck matter immensely.
Oh, the design is crucial.
Yeah, the first edition bypassed all that typical decorative, psychedelic aesthetic of the era. It was engineered as a functional, minimalist interface. You had this stark black cardboard box with gold leaf embossed lettering.
And that gold leaf was highly intentional. It wasn't just for show. No, it imparts a sense of solemnity, value and authority. But when you're in the middle of a creative crisis, you really need to trust the tool you're using. The physical design commands respect.
And it was also designed to have a really compact spatial footprint, so it could sit permanently on a mixing console. I think the dimensions were exactly 8.5 by 11.0 by 4.8 centimeters.
Right, so it wouldn't get in the way of the actual work.
Exactly. But the cards themselves are the real interface. They were printed on heavy white cardstock with solid black reverse faces.
That high contrast visual asymmetry is key. It establishes a clean physical threshold. You have the unread state, the black side, and the active instruction on the white side.
And they use a clean 10-point sans serif typeface, right?
Yeah, to minimize cognitive load under those low-light studio conditions. Even the physical weight of the cardstock forces you to handle it deliberately.
And that first edition was an extremely limited run. Just 500 numbered copies signed by the creator. So you might have copy number 1 or copy number 2.
And it even included 4 to 5 blank cards.
Oh, to position the tool as an extendable framework.
Exactly, rather than a closed, dogmatic manual.
It's like the physical design of the box acts exactly like the emergency brake in a car. It's a tactile interface, specifically engineered to snap you out of a mental tailspin. You literally have to physically stop what you're doing, reach out, and pull the emergency brake to shift your momentum.
That physical intervention disrupts the psychological crisis, and we see that evolution continue as the tool proved its worth. By the second edition in 1978, they expanded it to 128 cards, making the prompts more generalizable for diverse disciplines, not just music and painting.
The history is fascinating, but moving from the physical box to the actual psychology, why does a vague prompt work better than a direct instruction?
That's the big question.
Right, because if I'm completely stuck on a problem, drawing a card that says water or go backwards feels like a prank. Why does that help me more than a card that says Try writing a new melody or rewrite the introduction.
Well, to understand that mechanism, we have to look at something called the Zeigarnik effect.
The Zeigarnik effect.
Yeah, it's a cognitive phenomenon where incomplete, interrupted, or blocked tasks generate this persistent level of psychological tension.
Oh, like when you're interrupted right before sending an important email.
Exactly. Or when you leave a puzzle half finished on the table. That incomplete task stays highly active in your working memory, creating this low-grade anxiety.
I hate that feeling.
We all do. And when you hit a creative block, your mind experiences a very stressful form of task interruption. In desperately trying to resolve that tension, the brain acts like a gradient descent algorithm.
Gradient descent. So we imagine the creative process as a physical landscape. The brain is like water flowing down a mountain.
Right.
When you're panicked and just want to relieve the tension of a blocked task, your brain takes the steepest, fastest path down to the nearest valley.
And that nearest valley is what cognitive scientists call a local minimum. In human terms, it means falling back into highly probable, familiar, and often overused pathways. You take the path of least resistance just to get the job done and relieve the psychological pressure.
Okay, so what the Oblique Strategies deck does is introduce a stochastic perturbation vector.
Yes.
So essentially throwing a wrench into the gears just to see what breaks, forcing you off that predictable path.
That is the perfect way to visualize it. You're intentionally introducing a high-variance random disruption. By drawing a highly abstract orthogonal constraint like honor thy error as a hidden intention, the deck forcibly ejects the brain from that local minimum.
It physically disrupts that path dependency.
Exactly. The cognitive load shifts instantly from stress-induced convergent thinking, where you're frantically searching for the one right answer, to play-induced divergent thinking, where multiple possibilities open up.
This sets it apart from other cognitive frameworks out there, right? Like cognitive scaffolding tools, such as the IDEO method cards or method kit.
Yeah, those are very different.
Because those tools are designed to reduce cognitive load by organizing a space. They give you a taxonomic checklist to ensure you systematically address all parameters of a project. They tell you exactly what to do.
And Oblique Strategies completely rejects that kind of prescription. It relies on purposeful ambiguity.
Because a prompt like water lacks a direct instruction, your brain is forced to engage in an active process of projection. You have to build an interpretive bridge between the abstract cue and the concrete parameters of your project.
And that interpretive bridge is where the actual innovation happens. You're no longer solving the problem directly, you're solving the puzzle of how the constraint applies to the problem.
But okay, let me push back on this a bit, because the procrastination risk here is real.
Oh, absolutely.
You can't just draw a card to avoid doing the work. Isn't there a real danger here of pseudo-profundity? Like, if the prompt is too vague, I could see a user using the deck to just dodge responsibility.
Yeah, for sure.
So let's say I'm supposed to be writing a difficult analytical report. I hit a wall, I draw a card that says, listen to the quiet voice, and I just use that as an excuse to go take a nap on the couch.
The danger of using it as an evasion tactic is very significant. The ambiguity only works if you're genuinely applying it to an active, difficult problem space.
So it's not a magic bullet.
Definitely not. It is absolutely not for technical debugging. If your software has a syntax error, pulling a card that says be dirty is not going to fix your broken code.
Right. You need systematic analysis and checklists for that.
Exactly. If you use the deck to avoid mastering the fundamentals of your craft, it just becomes a procrastination device. It devolves into innovation theater.
Innovation theater. I love that phrase. So the only way this actually functions is if the stakes are incredibly high and you are locked into the process, which is exactly the pressure cooker David Bowie and Brian Eno were in during their Berlin sessions.
Oh, that's the ultimate case study.
Yeah. To answer the question of whether this is just procrastination, we can look at how this operates when millions of dollars, intense studio schedules, and massive musical legacies are on the line. You see this playing out perfectly in the Berlin Trilogy, the albums Low, Heroes, and Lodger.
Those sessions, recorded at places like Hansa Studios in West Berlin, are legendary, precisely because Bowie and Eno were using the deck as an operational tool to break their own default professional habits.
Right.
A brilliant example is during the tracking of the instrumental piece Sense of Doubt on the album Heroes. They essentially ran a real-world game theory experiment in the studio.
I love this story. So before they started recording, Eno and Bowie each secretly drew one card from the deck. They didn't show each other, they just set strict operational rules that they would take turns adding overdubs, strictly adhering to their hidden prompt.
Yeah. Eno secretly drew a card that said, try to make everything as similar as possible.
Okay.
So his operational rule for the session was to weave these smooth, continuous, low-frequency synthesizer drones. He was trying to create a completely homogeneous, unified sonic landscape.
Meanwhile, Bowie secretly drew a card that said, emphasize differences.
The exact opposite.
Yes. So while Eno is trying to smooth everything out and make it uniform, Bowie is deliberately disrupting Eno's work by injecting jarring, sharp, highly contrasting piano chords and dissonant textures. They are actively working at cross purposes, essentially fighting each other through the music.
And that structural contradiction is the genius of the exercise. The result was a masterpiece of atmospheric tension.
Yeah, so good.
By allowing those opposing constraints to clash in a controlled environment, they completely bypass the polite compromise that usually ruins collaborative efforts.
Oh, that makes so much sense. When highly skilled people collaborate, they often smooth off each other's edges to be agreeable.
Exactly. The secret prompts prevented that.
And it wasn't just about conflicting abstract instructions either. They used the deck to enforce brutal physical constraints. Like during the 1978 sessions for Lodger at Mountain Studios, Bowie felt the backing track for Boys Keep Swinging sounded too polished.
Too professional.
Yeah, it sounded like a group of highly paid professionals just going through the motions. So they drew a prompt suggesting a role reversal. They forced an instrument swap among these highly accomplished session musicians.
Which is wild.
Completely wild. Carlos Alomar, who is this incredibly precise rhythm guitarist, was forced to play drums. The virtuoso drummer Dennis Davis had to play bass guitar.
And George Murray, the steady pocket groove bassist, was moved to keyboards.
That is a terrifying position for a professional musician to be in. You're stripping away their primary asset, their muscle memory.
Right.
The lack of familiarity forced this raw, unstable garage band energy. They literally couldn't rely on their standard professional licks. It's like forcing a Michelin star chef to cook a gourmet meal using only a microwave and a plastic spoon, you know? By stripping away all their technical virtuosity, it forced raw, authentic problem solving.
And to finish the track, Tony Visconti had to re-record a driving bass line, and guitarist Adrian Belew contributed a chaotic solo compiled from multiple unguided takes.
It's just brilliant.
And this philosophy extended to the engineering side as well. In that era, Cold War-era studios had recently introduced 24-track tape machines.
Right, which was a huge deal at the time.
A massive deal. But the sudden abundance of tracks led to an additive recording process. Artists would just fill every channel, deferring critical decisions, which led to cluttered, muddy arrangements. The default human assumption is always that more space means more elements.
Which is why Eno's approach is so radical here. He used the deck to force subtraction. He relied on prompts like, take away the important parts and discover the recipes you were using and abandon them.
Imagine looking at a dense 24-track commercial pop mix and deciding to just remove the lead vocal entirely.
That's unthinkable for most producers.
It is. But by removing the central element, the lead vocal or the primary drum beat, the surrounding elements are forced to take on new structural responsibilities. Suddenly, a quiet background drone or a weird percussive scrape is transformed into the main melodic hook. This subtractive approach, driven entirely by these oblique prompts, basically laid the groundwork for modern minimalism and ambient music.
So how did Bowie and Eno avoid turning those studio sessions into just unlistenable avant-garde noise? Because the secret isn't just owning the deck, right? It's the strict rules of engagement they followed.
Yeah, without discipline, pulling cards degenerates into a superficial gimmick. You see this when people just draw repeatedly until they find a prompt that is easy or convenient to execute.
Oh, like re-rolling the dice until you win.
Exactly. The absolute necessity here is what is called the law of unconditional trust. You treat the deck as an unappealable operational authority.
The protocol is incredibly strict.
Yeah.
First, you have to genuinely acknowledge the block. You must commit in advance to executing whatever card is drawn, regardless of how absurd or destructive it seems.
Yes.
Then you draw only one card. Do not draw a second. Do not put it back. And you have to spend at least 15 minutes trying to apply it to your problem. Even if it says something completely counterintuitive like be dirty or try faking it, you have to figure out how to manifest that concept in your work for 15 unbroken minutes.
And beyond the single card draw, there are deployment architectures for different scales of problems. For project scoping, there's the trio constraint matrix.
How does that work?
You deal 3 cards face down representing the initial, operational, and restructuring positions. So you might draw, use an old idea for the initial phase, only one element of each kind for operational execution, and take away the important parts for restructuring.
So it builds a dynamic systemic chain of constraints to map out the entire life cycle of a project.
Exactly. And for team space and gridlock, there's the multi-user fiction workshop. You pair people up on a shared document, give them secret contradictory prompts, just like the Sense of Doubt recording session, and they take turns editing. No talking aloud.
No talking at all.
None. That completely bypasses groupthink and polite consensus.
Okay, but if I'm working in a high-stakes corporate environment where I can't afford to, say, make a sudden destructive action, how do I limit the blast radius of these experiments? I mean, I can't just delete the company's financial database because a piece of heavy cardstock told me to.
Well, the key is to bound the experiment. You don't apply the destructive constraint to the entire project. You apply it to a single slide in a presentation, one paragraph in a memo, or you dedicate just a single 10-minute sprint to exploring the bizarre constraint.
Oh, I see.
It's about minimizing risk while still forcing the cognitive pivot. You limit the blast radius so the failure is cheap, but the potential insight is massive.
That makes total sense.
And if teams want to build their own custom decks, there are strict syntax rules. You have to avoid overspecification, like change the CSS class name, which ages rapidly and restricts interpretation. You must also avoid binary yes or no commands. The language needs semantic, density-strong, active verbs that force a relational constraint.
Because the challenge of breaking out of predictable patterns isn't limited to the analog days of the 1970s. In today's world, we face an entirely new version of the average problem, and that is generative AI.
Oh, AI is the ultimate example of this. If we look at how large language models actually function, they are trained to predict the most statistically probable next token.
Right.
By their very mathematical nature, their default output tends towards the average of their training data. Without deliberate intervention, generative AI excels at producing highly conventional conformist work. It is the ultimate gradient descent into the ultimate local minimum.
Yeah, we have all seen that totally planned, perfectly competent, but completely uninspired AI text. Let's say you ask an AI to write a marketing pitch. By default, it will give you a document full of buzzwords like synergy, revolutionary, and paradigm shift, because statistically those words appear together in marketing data.
Exactly. It's safe, but it's boring.
To fix that, researchers have developed the Oblique Perturbation engine. It's a system prompt that forces an AI to act as an adversarial co-design partner.
Yes, you engineer the system prompt so the AI is explicitly instructed to systematically reject the most statistically probable solutions. You feed the oblique strategy corpus into the model and force it to apply a random constraint to its output.
So it has to fight its own training.
Precisely. The AI has to explicitly state the path of least resistance, reject it, and provide a highly detailed solution based entirely on an abstract rule.
So if the AI is generating that marketing copy, and the oblique prompt injected is only one element of each kind, the AI is forced to completely restructure its output. It might restrict itself from using any repeating adjectives or format the pitch without using any bullet points.
And the result is wildly different from the mathematical average.
It's like bowling with the bumpers up. Default AI guarantees you won't fall in the gutter, but you'll only ever play an average predictable game. Injecting an oblique constraint is like putting a tiny obstacle in the middle of the lane. It forces the ball to curve, spin, and find an entirely new, unpredictable path to the pins, like throwing chili flakes into vanilla ice cream.
That's a great analogy. That constraint completely changes the trajectory. And it isn't just AI generation. In personal knowledge management networks like Obsidian, users are building these massive digital second brains full of notes.
Oh yeah, I've seen those.
Over time, they get stagnant from digital clutter. So developers have built open source plugins like Shuffle and Smart Random Note. By hitting a hotkey, the system pulls random, seemingly unrelated notes together, injecting an oblique prompt to force lateral connections.
So it forces you to link a note on, say, systems biology with a note on typography.
Exactly. It creates a collision of ideas that you would never organically search for. This touches on what design researchers call the authenticity-interpretability trade-off.
What's that?
Well, when we build co-creative tools with AI, if the tool just gives you a perfectly optimized, highly structured overlay, you risk turning creative work into a predictable optimization exercise. You lose creative autonomy.
Right, because the machine is doing all the thinking.
But by intentionally introducing purposeful ambiguity into the prompt pipeline, you strike a balance. It forces the human user to actively interpret and synthesize the outcome. It allows the computer to transition from a mere optimization tool into an active collaborative partner.
We see this in modern research-driven frameworks too, like the architectural cognition cards, which translate complex spatial cognition data into playful, constraint-based serious games.
Yeah, that's a perfect modern application.
Constraints, whether they are physical cards in a gold leaf box or algorithmic system prompts, are not barriers to innovation. They are the actual mechanism that drives it. By forcing the mind to build new interpretive bridges, we escape our own highly optimized but deeply predictable routines.
The mind wants efficiency, but the constraint forces exploration.
Which brings us to a final thought for you to take away. Wrapping up this journey from a 1975 black box to the cutting-edge AI prompts of the current era. If constraints are the actual mechanism that drives innovation, what default setting or habitual routine in your own daily life is secretly your biggest creative block?
That's the real question.
Yeah. If you were to wake up tomorrow at 9 a.m., what absurd oblique constraint could you introduce to shatter that routine and see your work with fresh eyes?
The answer might just be to honor thy error as a hidden intention.
If you find this podcast interesting, please like and subscribe.